Thank you very much indeed, Francesco. So we have had an overview of the traditional Mediterranean diet and some of the science behind the diet as a whole. We've now heard about some of the challenges about evidence around some of the micro-constituents of the Mediterranean diet. So our next speaker is Professor Francesco Sofi, co-organizer of today. Francesco is going to, first of all, Francesco has written some seminal and landmark papers around the Mediterranean diet. So I first read in 2008 a meta-analysis, which was published in the British Medical Journal from Francesco and his team. A meta-analysis is when you look at numerous studies and bring them all together to look at the evidence. And that was showing how the Mediterranean diet was associated with decreased risk of heart disease, strokes, dementia, and many other conditions. So Francesco has been leading the way in terms of the evidence around the Mediterranean diet. But what we wanted to do with Food Values 2 is to take that further and actually to explore the challenges in our modern dietary environment and how we can promote the adoption of the Mediterranean diet to a broader population, not only here in the Mediterranean, but also further afield into other parts of the world. So we'll hear now from Francesco about what we face in making the Mediterranean diet a reality for other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for the kind introduction. Okay, so what I'm trying to do with these things and what I'm trying to talk about is a new concept about the relationship of food and health. So the need for a new approach. What they call about food and health. Okay, so let's start from the history. So when we talk about food and health, we talk of something which is modern. If you think that this motto has been Hippocrates, what we are talking about. We are talking about something that is related to the finding of an optimal dose of nutrients in the physical health. What changed over the history is the relationship of food and nutrition and health. Because if you look at the beginning of the last century, in 19th century, the first relationship was related to sanitation. So something which was related to a role of contamination. So the problem at that time was the germ theory, so the problem was the foodborne illnesses. So at that time to prevent these diseases, so there was the germ theory of nutrition. After that, there was a change in 1930, with the discovery of vitamins. So the vitamin theory, so the theory of deficiency. So they started the person to be deficient of something. So the role of inadequate intake and illnesses. And after that, in 1950, there was the first relationship of excess. So something related with the health economy, the population after the Second World War just became to be wealthy, and there was an excess, a diet linked to non-communicable disease. The first discovery of Ansel Keys and the Mediterranean diet related to disease. After this discovery, there was plenty of data in the scientific literature saying that, and you are probably know that, or no, okay, anyway, how many foods are associated with risk of disease, in this case, are beneficial for disease, and in this case, this other case, are detrimental for disease, because of many studies showing the association of food groups and disease. So what changed after all this data, that we started to do something which is more a dichotomic approach. So we started to give indication to the people how to eat and what not to eat, good or bad. And what we produce are guidelines, laws, indication, recommendations, and everything related to what to eat and what not to eat. What was the result of this approach? The result of this approach was, if you look at the number of regions all over the world not meeting dietary recommendation in 2005 and in projection 2050, the situation is dramatic, because if you look at the regions who did not, who not meet dietary recommendation in terms of fruit and vegetables, red meat, sugar, and energy intakes, probably most of the the countries do not meet the dietary recommendation, and the results of these things are the changes of dietary habits. The changes of dietary habits over the 50 years, we will look at this graph. All the countries of the world are consuming more calories than the past. And if you look at the composition of diet in 1960, it was composed in this way of 2,000 kilocalories composed of these percentages. And if you look at after 50 years, the situation dramatically changed in terms of increasing of energy intake, more than 700 kilocalories per person, and the contribution of percentage increased in terms of sugar and fat and meat, especially meat and sugar and fat, and decrease in grains and carbohydrates. So this is not related to the dietary recommendation, because the person know what to eat, but they don't do that. And as a result of these things, there was a paradoxical thing. If you look at the dietary quality among 187 countries all over the world, the countries that have now the healthiest diet are the poor countries. So all the poor countries have a healthiest diet because they follow our recommendation. So eat less meat, eat less energy intake, which is completely paradoxical if you think. And in terms of a Mediterranean diet, we had a decrease of adherence to Mediterranean diet in 50 years. Look at the adherence, the difference of color means the difference of different adherence in 40 years' time of all the countries of the Mediterranean diet. And as a final result of these things, look at the biodiversity. Professor Tricopoulos said before, biodiversity a century ago and now, look at the different cultivars of different foods in terms of fresh vegetables and fruits. We had something more than 3 times less varieties of any type of foods in a century, lost in a century. So we need to change the approach. We need to change the diet not because the diet should be lifestyle, while now the concept is restriction. So we moved from one good thing, the good approach, because the lifestyle is a good approach, to a negative approach. This is the modern acceptor. And what we created now, we created a number of persons who invent a different diet, take out the Mediterranean diet, but the other diets are, if you think at the feature in common of these diets is something which is restricted. So no gluten, no carbohydrates, no salt. So it's something which is a negative approach to the diet. And we created, this is the last one I found on the internet, which is incredible. I found a new term, pescetarian. So the person who don't eat meat, but eat fish and poultry, which is pescetarian. So it's incredible. But he said something related to the restriction of things, not with something we had in the diet, but something we taken out from the diet. So it's incredible, so we need to change these things because I don't know where we're going in this way. We need to change in terms of, in my opinion, we need to find a relationship between diet and wellness and health, but not just health in terms of what to suggest people what to eat, but the wellness, and we need to introduce other words like beauty, culture, history, art, tradition, because the wellness is not just health. The wellness is, the concept of wellness are different, and the six features of wellness are emotional, spiritual, financial, intellectual, vocational, social. So we need to approach the food as a complex way, not just as a tradition, as a nutrition. Possible solutions. Okay, in my opinion, I think that the prohibition doesn't work. The prohibitive laws now doesn't work. We don't have to suggest people what to eat because they know what to eat, they know what not to eat, but they don't do that. So we need to give indication and solution. And one of the solution, not to eat something, not to eat, but to eat some more, not to eat something less. But, and in my opinion, one of the good solution of these things is the approach of what mother elephant does with the baby elephant. So the so-called the nudge theory. So we need to do something to push people gently to the right decision. You know that the person decide the thing they want to do in a few seconds without thinking. So we need to find a solution to gently push this person to correct act in terms of decision. The famous example of nudge is the fly you can find in a public toilet, not here in Italy, but in other countries. You can find a fly pictured here in the public toilet, which has importance because the person think that is real, so they target the pee to the fly. This is the right thing. And as a solution of these things, we have a reduced spillage of 80%. You can say, okay, this happens because males are stupid and think, yes, this is true. This is the solution. The men think they are that this was real, and they put the target of P in terms of moving the fly, but the solution is to reduce the spillage by 80%. In every public toilet in other countries like Germany or Dutch, they picture the fly just for this solution. This is the famous nudge example, and the traditional example of nudge in terms of food are the markets, because we in the past used to go in the market and we trust in a grocer or a person who sells us the fresh vegetable or fresh fruits. This was an example of nudge because the person just advised us what to eat, while now the modern example of nudge is something which is more related to our decision. So it's not the person who suggests us what to eat, but we need to take into account other things like color, light, and so on. So the decision is difficult. And the other example of nudge in terms of food for babies, for example, is this picture. In this picture, like if you put something good in the front of the table, while in the rear of the table, also Homer decided to eat something probably more healthier because he finds there, and he probably suggests to do that. And we need to do that with the children, and this I have finished. For example, if you put bread and olive oil in front of the table to children, at least here in Italy, I don't know if the children like that, and he decided to do that. If you put candies, he consumes candies, of course. So this is a modern example of nudge we needed to introduce. Thank you very much.